Okay, class, now for part two. I was limited in my recording time, so after 15 minutes it got cut off. So we're going to continue with this review of reading assessment, or an overview, I should say. So, what areas of reading do we assess? And I apologize for the email ding. We assess language and metalinguistic abilities. That's very important early on. Think back to our discussion about the Hart and Risley study, meaningful differences. We look at print awareness. Do students understand these concepts of print? We would like to assess the knowledge of the alphabet. Do they know the alphabet? Can they tell us the alphabet? Do they recognize letters? In this alphabetic principle that we've discussed. Word recognition, so that has to do with decoding and sight word. Fluency, and I talked about that in the previous video. Oral reading fluency is what you see that shown up as ORF, O-R-F. And then comprehension. So let's talk about what we would measure with language and metalinguistic abilities. So remember, this is language. This isn't necessarily actually reading on a page, okay? But we're going to look at their mastery of these different areas here. So vocabulary. Do they recognize words? Do they know the meaning of words? And typically we want to look at some of the most common words. Morphological awareness. This has to do with, we talked about morphemes in class. It's similar to that. Changing of words and how that changes the word's meaning, adding an S at the end of a word, for example. Syntactic development, which is basically checking syntax. Do they understand syntax? And that has to do with grammar. Phonological awareness, which is, remember, sound. Are they able to recognize separate words, separate syllables, onset and rhyme? And then the most important level, phonemic awareness. And they have to have phonemic awareness in order to begin using phonics. And then pragmatics, and that just has to do with the social use of language. So let's look a little bit deeper into print awareness and how we would measure that. This basically measures what the student knows about how print works. So concepts of print and knowledge of various text structures. Concepts of print having to do with left to right, reading a page top to bottom, etc. We talked about all those in class in detail. And then various text structures, so a narrative versus, for example, a recipe card versus some type of informative text, such as a manual or something like that. Also, signs and symbols. To measure alphabetic understanding, we are going to check whether the student is able to generate letters and is able to name letters. So the letter generation would be a little bit more difficult of a task if we're thinking about younger children. Naming has to do with, we show them letters. Can they tell us the name of those letters? Generation, they actually have to come up with them on their own. Letter sound correspondences, we talked about that. And then spelling. And all of these, have to do with some of the rules that we talked about, or the spelling and the letter sound correspondences have to do with the rules that we talked about in class on Monday. I know that stuff was a little bit overwhelming and tricky, and I encourage you to go back and read that chapter again and make sure that you understand that stuff before we move on. We also would measure word recognition. This has to do with measuring the student's ability to decode unfamiliar words and to recognize familiar words or high frequency words. Decoding is the student, being able to use phonics skills and letter sound correspondences in order to read a new word. Sight word knowledge has to do with our high frequency words that we see in reading. Keep in mind that our goal is to increase the automaticity at which a student reads. So by the end, we want more and more words to become sight words, so to speak, to become automatic. When seen, the student can read them automatically without having to sound them out. Fluency, we talked about the parts of fluency before, but again, oral reading fluency, ORF, that's going to check the accuracy of the reading, the word reading automaticity, meaning, sorry for that bleep, word reading automaticity, which has to do with the reading rate, or actually the fact that they won't need to sound each single word out. That's going to impact the rate. The quicker a student, the more automatically a student can say a word and recognize a word, then that will help their reading rate. And then prosody. This actually also measures fluency in other aspects of knowledge. So remember, when we talked about fluency before, we talked about working memory and the ability for a student to use working memory to retrieve information from long-term memory and to apply it to what they're reading now. So it gets at some of that too. And students have to use working memory for many more tasks than just reading. So just keep that in mind as well. Now we have this neat little picture here, but this is just to help us as we're thinking about building this bridge across from reading difficulty and failure all the way to literacy and having literate students. We first have to master this initial sound fluency. Can students hear that initial sound of a word, and are they able to tell us the initial sounds of words in front of them? Phoneme segmentation fluency. So think phonemic awareness. Are they able to take a word and give us each separate sound within those words? Nonsense word fluency. And I want you to think a minute about why that would be important. I think I'm going to give you that as part of your assignment to tell me why nonsense word fluency would be important and why it would give us different information from just regular word fluency. Okay? And then oral reading fluency, which is just the overall, we just talked about it, this stuff, accuracy, automaticity, reading rate, prosody. Okay? Once we have that, then we are more competent readers. We can begin to concentrate on meaning at that point. So comprehension improves. Excuse me. And that leads us to comprehension. Um, are students able to understand? And look at this. It's not just understand, but also remember, use, or evaluate text that they read. There are several different types of comprehension that we would want to check. The most basic is the literal comprehension. That's kind of like remembering and understanding facts from a text. Inferential comprehension, strategy use. Are they able to use strategies in order to gain an understanding of the text? Listening comprehension. So this is, think about if you read a story aloud or a passage aloud to a student. Um, are they able to comprehend what they hear? Are they able to apply what they read? That would come with, informational types of texts. Um, for some reason, I think math automatically there. But, can they use what they read and apply it to new information? And then critical reading. And of course, this is the most complex, and this is where, the skill that we use most frequently in college and academia and more difficult classes. Okay, so I am going to have a third video for you that is an overview of the informal reading inventory. Um, it is just an overview, and we will get way more in detail about it when we talk about your assignment of the informal reading inventory. So I will see you in the third video.